This is part 2 of the episode. If you already haven't, please make sure to head over to part 1 to watch the first part of this episode. This interview has been brought to you by the Flow States. To learn more about Zahra and her journey, please refer to the links below this video. This episode is proudly sponsored by TCGI Financial, with services ranging from mortgage solutions, wealth management, and construction financing. TCGI is here to help. Contact Sage Wiseman at 647-202-7010 or finance@tcgifinancial.com for a free consultation today. Alternatively, visit tcgifinancial.com for a comprehensive overview of the services provided by TCGI. Remember to join the mailing list for valuable daily market insights. Finance in a flash, fast, friendly, and focused on you.
I don't know how to go about saying this without getting really deep about like how everything kind of unfolded.
Yeah.
I don't even know, like, you dealt with death the first time when you were 12.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, that's enough grief for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And then for it to happen again a second time when you're like pregnant, like heavily pregnant.
I know.
And out of nowhere.
Yeah. It was really shitty.
It
like sucks.
That's a good way of putting it.
It like sucks. No, I like anybody who's ever asked. I'm like, it's fucking shitty. Like, what do you want me to say? It's shitty.
And it's like it's even more heartbreaking because he wanted to be a dad.
Yeah.
There's so many dads that don't want to be dads. Like he was like, it seemed like he was so concerned. Even the story that you just told me about him going to your father, I think that's so sweet.
Yeah. They definitely. It's when everything happened, I remember like asking my dad. I was like, can you talk to me about like because they would talk all the time like. They would bond over the unhealthy habit of smoking.
Yeah.
But it was something that they both did. And like anybody who like smokes, knows it's like a social thing. And so like anytime one of them would go out, the other would go out and they would talk for like an hour after like eating. And I'd be like, okay, like food's done. Like, I'm going to the room now if you want to come.
He's like, I don't want to come.
I know. He was like, hold on, I'm talking to your dad. I'm like, okay. But no, I think like, yeah, it sucked. I think like,
can we like, I want to ask, right after he passed away, where was your headspace at? Like, how did you even, like, was it the same type of shock or was it just like, because you were right beside him when it happened, right?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the night that it happened, he was like, we went to bed like super early all the time. We were in bed by like 9.
Yeah.
And I was exhausted. It was my last week of working before maternity
Can I
leave.
ask how many months pregnant you were?
I was 8. I would like the day that it happened was my 8-month mark.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, I was super tired that day and he was in bed and he was just like on his phone. And I was on my phone too. I was looking for stuff for our baby shower because it was coming up. And I started to doze off. And then I woke up again. He was still on his phone. And then, so I would like kiss him and then I would go back to sleep. And then I woke up again and he was still on his phone. And then I looked at the time and I was like, okay, like I'm just going to go to bed. Like I was planning on just taking a nap. And then I fell asleep and then I woke up again and he was still awake. And I like kissed him and I was like, oh, every time I woke up, I said, I love you. And he would say, I love you. And then I would go back to sleep. And then I said it again on the third time that I woke up. And he was like, why do you keep saying it? He was like, why do you keep saying that? Like I'm going somewhere. And and then I got upset. I was like, I don't know, Jordan. I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe I just have a lot of love to give to you or whatever. I said something along the lines of like, maybe I just love you that much or something. And I turned around like any girl would do. Like you're upset, you face the other way. And I faced the other way and he hugged me and he was like, I'm not going anywhere. And he was like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, go to sleep. Like, I love you. And then I woke up and our bedroom light was like on. And so I was like, oh, he's still awake. And then I was going to go back to sleep. I closed my eyes and then for some reason I opened them And I looked over and he wasn't beside me. And I was like, mm. So then I went on my phone and I like went to check his location because we had each other's location. And like him and I dabbled in very late night snacks. And so sometimes we would go out and like get food. So I was like, maybe he went out. And I looked at his location. It was at home. So I was like, okay. And then I was like, maybe he's in the bath. Because he liked having baths. And so then I called him and he didn't answer. And so then I was like, I texted him. Or no, I didn't text him. I yelled for him and I didn't hear him. So then I went to the bathroom and he was there. And so I think it was just, it's crazy to think like, because like I said earlier, like grief or when things like that or that traumatic happen, everything is like vivid. Timestamps, what you're wearing, what was happening, like to the second, everything is so vivid and clear. And there's some things that like fade away, but like, yeah, it was
When you
crazy.
saw him, did you know right away this is like not normal, like he's not here?
I saw his foot.
Oh wow.
And I'm trying to get in through the door. And when I could finally creak it enough, I could kind of see him. And I think, again, death was never crossed my mind. And I remember when like the services came, I called Brittany too. Because her and I lived like 2 minutes apart, or 2 minutes away. Called her, I was like, I need you at the house now. And she got to the house. And I was performing CPR on him until the
You were 8 months pregnant performing CPR.
yeah, it was shitty.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. The paramedics got there and they took over.
Sorry, where were your parents at this point?
My dad was asleep, and he woke up because I screamed, "Mom, call 911." And my mom froze. And I think it was just very...
Oh my God, it's traumatic. She called 911 the first time with your brother.
And she was like, I was like, call 911, call 911. And I had called them too, off of his phone because it was beside him. And, yeah, they were there and they were working on him. And I think like death wasn't crossing my mind. I was like, God wouldn't do this. Like, you know what I mean? And I was like, I think as the events go on, there is a paramedic that has to keep you informed. And she was like, we're still working on him. There's no signs of life. And it was kind of just a series. And I remember like, obviously I was crying. And I remember screaming. I was like, God, God, if you need him, like, if you need him more than I do, then I will understand. I was like, please don't do this now. I was like, please. I was like, I know I don't talk to you enough. And I was like, if you need him more than I do, then I will understand. And I was like, don't do this to me. And then, yeah, we went to the hospital and that was that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was hard. I mean, at that point, I think like a week went by. I actually had an appointment that day, so it happened on like the Tuesday night carrying over to Wednesday morning, and we had an appointment on Wednesday, my 8-month checkup. And I genuinely, I don't know, I think I was just super numb.
Can you remember like the days after, like
being that it happened as long ago as it did, I can like piece it together. But the first like week, maybe like the first 4 or 5 days, I didn't want to get out of bed. I never got out of bed. And mind you, I was 8 months pregnant. So lying in bed was painful all day, but I couldn't do anything else. And like, I was at a point where I was just crying myself to sleep. Like, I would wake up, and the weird thing about grief, or like about death, is, or the weird thing about the first few days is it's so unbelievable. Like, because it's like, well, I was just with them, but now they're not coming back. And there's this false hope that a miracle will happen, right? Like, something like, you know, like, yes, they've passed, but there's still the slightest hope that, like,
He's gonna walk through the door.
he's gonna walk through the door, or I'm gonna get a phone call.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be like, no, he's alive. And like, I think anyone who's like experienced grief knows, like, it's such you're in such disbelief that nothing feels real, and that there's still hope. And I think for me, like, even when like you wake up, you don't remember until you remember. And I think it's like maybe like 10 seconds where like you wake up and you're like awake, and then it hits you instantly, where you're like, and for me, when it happened, I only wanted to sleep on his side of the bed. I didn't want to sleep on my side of the bed because I resented myself for like being asleep. Like, it was a hard thing, but
You felt guilty that you were asleep.
yeah, well, I mean everything, there's so much like should have, could have, would have, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would sleep on his side. And I just remember, like, there was one point where I woke up and like all of my like bridesmaids, for lack of better terms, all my best friends, all my bridesmaids were in the room with me, on the bed with me. And then we were doing like the novena prayers. So like, every night there was friends and family that were coming and doing prayers, and like, I couldn't even listen to the prayers. Like, I stayed in my room because I was like, to hear people say, pray for the soul of Jordan, was like gut wrenching. Like, I did not want to hear it because I was still in disbelief. But I think like that first week was just pain. Like, I just remember lying there and like, I wasn't eating, and that's what my parents too, like, they were like, you have to go to your appointment because you're not eating. Like, Zahra, you're pregnant, you have to eat, like, you have to drink. And I couldn't. And I remember like Brittany would try and spoon feed me, or my dad was spoon feeding me watermelon. That's all I was eating. And I would eat like 3 pieces and like stop. And my OB was like, she's fine. They were like, she's doing everything that she has to do for this baby. And they were like, if she wants to lie down and cry, that's exactly what she needs to do.
Oh, your OB said that, eh?
Yeah, and she was like, don't worry. Like, she was like, you do what you need to do. And she was like, because if you're not doing what you need to do for yourself, then you're not doing what the baby needs you to do. And I think like that week went by, and it was just like, after that, I was like, okay, I'm having a baby. Like, I don't have time for this.
That realization hit you, eh?
Yeah, I think like that week passed, and yeah, I was like, I can't lie in bed all day. I have nothing ready. I have 3 weeks until this baby is coming. And at the time too, I had my OB was like, we're probably gonna have to schedule a C-section within this week.
Yeah.
So I was like, I have a major surgery coming up. Like, the day I'm giving birth is planned.
Yeah.
So I need to get my shit together before this day. And yeah, it was kind of just like all my attention, was focused on the arrival of the baby.
Yeah.
It was like the week passed, and my grief was my grief. And then I was like, okay, I don't have time for grief. Like, something inside me was like, Zahra, get the up.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have time for grief right now.
Yeah.
You have a baby coming. And I think like that's kind of like where I was.
Yeah.
After, because I like, you don't have time.
How was the delivery then? How was it giving birth to your baby without Jordan?
I think like, so I asked, after everything happened, obviously he was going to be in the room with my mom. And you're only allowed the 2 people. So I was like, I asked my brother. I asked my dad first, and I knew my dad was going to say no. Like, I told my brother, Sean, my oldest brother, and he was like, well, don't you want to ask dad? I was like, Dad's going to say no. And I immediately asked my dad, and he's like, no. I don't want to be in there. He's like, I'll be outside smoking.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say that, but whatever. Anyways, and so I asked my brother to be in there, and my brother has been like super supportive, and I needed him in there because my mom is very emotional, like emotionally driven.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're going through like when you're trying to navigate the balance of like grief and like giving birth, like you're supposed to be excited, happy, whatever, but you're also anxious, but then you're also dealing with grief. I was like, I need someone who can like convey,
Stable.
yeah, who is like mentally stable. And so I had my brother there, and like he made it like such an easier experience because it was like he could joke and he knew like how to read the situation, and like if I was silent, he could talk to my doctors.
Yeah.
He was like, no, she needs this. No, she's fine. But it was crazy. It was a crazy experience. I was supposed to have a C-section, then I didn't.
Oh, you delivered naturally?
Yeah, because he actually turned last minute.
Oh, wow.
So for like a good period of my third trimester, I was breech, where the baby is not the right way. And yeah, it wasn't until they were about to like cut me open. They were like, let's just double check, like see where the head is so we can like kind of gauge where to cut. And they did the ultrasound, and they're like, oh, like his head is turned upside down. So then it became a whole like,
oh, that's nuts.
I know, it was crazy. And I was like, damn, I was looking forward to just lying there and not doing anything. But no, it was a crazy experience, and I'm really grateful that like everything happened naturally. Yeah, it's like the recovery time was so much smaller.
Yeah.
Like I got to be active with like my baby. Like I could stand and do things, and like, yeah, it was really surreal. I brought one of Jordan's sweaters to the hospital. For the longest time, like his clothes were like my safety blanket.
Yeah.
And so I brought one of them, and I just like rested it on the chair, and I was just like, I think when you're giving birth, all you're focused on is like the pain.
Yeah.
But it was a really good experience. Like I think it would have been super different, but I mean, everything happens.
Yeah. And then after Jackson came, because I think you were saying that you wanted to focus all your attention, like you're going to be a mom, you have to give birth, you have to be healthy for your baby. But after Jackson came, do you think like the grief came back? Like, I think you put the grief aside because you're like, I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
But was there a point that you kind of were like, well, it keeps coming back, I have to do something about this?
Yeah, I definitely, I don't even remember like sleeping. And like when you have a newborn, like you barely sleep. But I think like, you know, after the baby's changed, fed, put back to sleep, like all of those silent moments of like what I was putting away were painful. Like it was like flooding back, and then but it wasn't enough, like it wasn't a substantial enough time within like his sleeping pattern that I could address like sadness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until and like I tried, like the hospital put me through like therapy a little bit in addition to like postpartum.
Yeah.
Because they were already like, you know, postpartum is a real thing, plus adding on what you're going through. So I was doing that for a little bit, and then it wasn't until maybe like a few months ago that like all of the grief that I was putting to the side or excusing myself from was hitting harder and harder, because it was, at the time it was, I don't have time for this. And I still tell that to myself, like, I don't have time to cry right now. Like I would be having an episode, or like, you know, hysterically crying, screaming, you know, banging pillows or banging the steering wheel as I'm driving, and you know, Jackson would start crying, or Jackson would need attention, and it was like, okay, I don't have time. Like I don't have, I would like get it together, like snap out of it. And now that Jackson is more independent with like playing with him, like playing with the toys by himself, or while he's eating, or like my parents are with him, it started to hit me harder and harder.
You get more moments to yourself.
Yeah, because I was getting more moments to myself. And one of my friends said to me, like, you know, you can distract yourself all you want, but your grief is waiting for you on the other side of that distraction. And I think like when I talked to my therapist, I was like, I am noticing it myself, that I am purposely distracting myself so that I do not have to cry. Like if I start to feel, or like, you know, I'm going through Jordan and I's photos, or I start reading things and I feel myself starting to cry, or I can tell that I'm about to have like an anxiety or panic attack where I just start scream crying, I like will turn the TV on, or I will get up and like, I don't know, go make food. Like I'll distract myself. And I told my therapist, I'm like, I can feel myself crying and then feel myself purposely distracting myself through scrolling on Instagram or whatever, right? And so she was like, I think like it's good that like you recognize that you're not dealing with your grief. And I think like it's just important to me because I want to be like healthy for my son.
Can I ask you what inspired you to start writing those passages on Instagram?
I think it's so funny because like my brother will always tease me like, there you go again, your novels.
I love reading them. Yeah.
I think like for me, like going back to like everything that happened with my brother, like I don't like talking about my feelings. Or when people ask me, like it's hard. Like anybody who's gone through grief knows, like you get to a point where you're like, I don't know how to act, because like if I'm sad, I don't want people to like, oh, it's so hard to explain, but you get to a point where like you don't know who or how to interact with people, because people are trying to feed off of my energy, right? They're trying to feel out how I feel. So if I'm sad, they're gonna like, you know what I mean? Like they're gonna be like, how are you doing? Whatever. And I don't want to be asked that. So I'm like, okay, so I can't act sad.
It's very isolating, right? Because like I feel like anytime you're in a room, you're aware that other people don't know how to approach you.
Yes.
So
even when you like approached me with this, I was like, you were like, I don't know what to say. And I was like, that's fine. Because it's like, even like, for example, like the first time I laughed, it was like,
is
like,
this okay?
People were like, is this okay? Like, are you okay to laugh? And like, even for myself, it's like, well, if I laugh, do people think I'm okay enough that I can start joking around again? Or do they understand that this is a one-time thing? Or it's like, or are they reading it as, oh, she's actually doing okay?
Yeah.
And when it's like, but I'm actually not. So it's like, you don't know how to act. Like, it's kind of like a balance of like, and then that in itself is very isolating.
Can I ask you, was there any one person or one instance or one like experience that you had during that period that really like helped you? You know what I mean? Did someone say something to you that you were more okay with dealing with the grief around other people, or was it just like a learning process?
I think like when it happened, like that night that it happened, Brittany was by my side the entire night, like the entire night. Like,
and it's important to mention, sorry, I don't think we got into this last night, Brittany was also at your house when Shane passed away.
Her and I definitely like, she's like looking at the camera. She's definitely, because like I never like, people who know, like I don't like talking about feelings, or I'm very much like I don't like hugging. I don't like talking about my feelings, or like I'll never tell somebody like she'll always joke and be like, okay, I love you, and I'm like, okay, like it makes me uncomfortable. And like that was like with Jordan, like Jordan was the only person I would ever hug, including my parents. He would be the only person I would hug, only person I would say I love you to, only person I would be affectionate towards. And so, when everything happened, like she was there for it all. She was the one who like called my work for me. She called my family. She called like our dance school for my mom. Like, and so, I even said to her as she was driving us home from the hospital that night, I said to her and my parents that were in the car, I said, if I'm mean or if I'm angry or if I do something whatever to anybody, I just want you to know that I don't know what I'm doing. And so then they were very like comforting. And then Brittany moved in with me for a little bit. Like she moved in for like a few months. Maya, my cousin, also moved in with me for a few months, and they were kind of just like there all the time. Like there were definitely like friends, like my cousin friend Sydney, like she was there almost every day. Well, like my best friends were there all the time when they could be.
Yeah.
And I think like around them, but especially like Brittany and Maya and even like my brother, I could feel what I was feeling. Or it was like if I needed to cry, they weren't asking like what's wrong or whatever. They would let me like feel it. And like my parents too, like my mom is very much like, what's wrong? Like what triggered? Like she'll ask me instantly, and I'm like, when you're so overwhelmed with your own emotions, you can't even answer questions. And I think like with those girls, like they would just let me feel it. And then when I would like start to like be okay again, they would be like, was it anything specific? Like, was there something specific that like triggered you? So I think like they really helped me work through it. Even my brother too, like I would call my brother, he would call me every day, like 4 or 5 times a day. Even now he still does, especially because he wants to see his like nephew. But they definitely like created a safe space, but also like protected my space. And like too, like there was like a lot of my family members like who would visit, or like, you know, when we had Jordan's services or whatever, like they were very much like my guardians. Like they were like always encircling me and Jackson. So I think like, it was definitely my phone's sorry. It was definitely easier to like grieve with certain people because the expectation was, there was no expectation.
It's just really interesting because I'm just like listening to you, and I'm wondering, you know, like if there is a person that's dealing with that sort of grief, I don't even know how to approach them. Like I don't know if it's like overwhelming, like you said, it's kind of like the elephant in the room, right? You know, somebody's important died to this person, so how do you even address it? Do you kind of
exactly and that's how that feels, like uncomfortable. Like how do you, like, do you want me to talk about it? Are we not talking about it? I think like, because even when we first talked, it was like, do you want to talk about this? Like it's the same on this side. It's like
it's mutual.
It's mutual because it's like, are people expecting me to talk about it, or do I just avoid it so that they don't feel uncomfortable? It's
so weird because you don't want to be identified by that too, right? You don't want to be the person whose fiance passed away, right?
Yeah, it's definitely hard. And like I think like too, like even in my dance school, for example, or just in any setting, like I'm not an emotional person. Like you will never see me cry in front of people. I'm always like the loud person, or I'm always like the one who's cracking jokes like quickly. And that wasn't who I was anymore. And that's not who I am anymore. I mean, in some scenarios, like I can bring myself to be outgoing again, and like it feels okay. But there's always like on the other side, there's always like, you know, are they going to feel uncomfortable if I start crying? Or like in my dance school, like when I start crying, like it feels uncomfortable for me, and because I feel like I'm putting other people in an uncomfortable situation. And so I think like when even people are like, they don't know how to, like they don't know what to say. And I think that's one thing that like so many people said when it first happened was like, I don't know what to say. Like, or they would be like, I know nothing I can say like matters, right? Because it's not going to change anything. But it's the same on the receiving side, of the person who's going through it. Is like, I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what people want from me. I don't even know what I want from myself. Like I don't know how to act around you people anymore, because it's like I'm that person who just lost my fiance, or I'm that person who's going through grief. So we need to be like hyper aware of this person, and that's how it feels. It's like
you don't even want the
attention. You don't even want the
attention.
You don't even want to be there sometimes, but you're like, you have to put yourself through those situations. And so I think like, as uncomfortable as it is for those people, it's uncomfortable it is
10 times worse.
And when you said like it's isolating, it really is, because it's like, nobody really knows. Like it's in my situation, like anybody in my life, I don't know anyone who's lost their partner. Like my grandparents are like happily married for like 60 years, like 90 years old together. Like all my aunts, uncles, everybody that I know is like with their person. And so like that was already like, I don't know who to turn to. And then it was like, you know, I don't know how to act. People are looking at me like, you know, like when you're in a room and like they see you, like I can feel it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it is isolating in a sense of like, no one understands. I don't understand myself. It's uncomfortable.
And you're just saying you kind of have to put yourself through those situations, right?
100%.
I remember seeing that post that you made about, I didn't even make sense. Like, I always remember reading that and I'm like, oh my God, what does that even mean, right? Immediately my thoughts went to your brother too. And I'm like, it hit you twice. And I think I just sent you a message and just saying like, yeah, I'm just like, I think it was like my elementary school self is hugging you, you know, just for the years that we spent together.
Yeah.
So you feel I guess it's still a continuous feeling, but this isolation and grief, and then, you know, you having your close friends and allowing them to have space for you and space for yourself. What other things have like helped you be okay with your grief?
Oh my gosh.
Or is it still like you're not okay with it? Like, are you still uncomfortable with it?
I mean, like, there's like the thing that like I learned through like being part of like groups of like other widows or like people.
You go to the support groups then,
and even through like therapy is like it's not it's not a run, it's a marathon. Like and there was like this picture that was circling throughout the group, and it was like a picture of like a jar and it was like a black circle in them. And it's not that like it's not that as time goes on your grief gets smaller or it gets or like, you know, like you grow out of it, but you learn to like live with it and like grieve. And I think like there are certain moments where especially if I haven't cried in a long time, I'm like, no, I need to let myself feel this. Like, and that's usually when I'll, you know, message my therapist and be like, I'm like feeling this, like I need help.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it just comes in waves where you think about, okay, like I'm sad today. I don't know.
I think with Jackson too, as he's growing older, do you ever like, of course you do, but like if Jordan was here, you know.
100%. Like there's so many things, I think especially like after everything had happened and like being surrounded by our friends, we would all do it. We would all be like, yo, what would Jordan say right now? Or we would be like, yo, Jordan would say this right now. And we would joke about that. And like, it was hard to do that at first, to be like, if he was here, if he was here. But even in the first few days when we would do certain things, like this is such a bad example, but when we were doing prayers for him, there was a prayer and it said something like, I don't know, something about evil or something about protecting him from evil, whatever. And every time, like when I heard it, I would laugh. And I had to explain to my friends, I was like, because Jordan like wasn't afraid of death.
Really?
And he was never afraid of death. And like, he would like laugh about it. Not laugh about it, but like,
yeah, I get what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, he was one of those people who are like, it's going to happen eventually, like, whatever. And so there was one, and so like, even too, he'd be like, if we were like, oh, like this person would haunt us, he'd be like, okay, haunt me. Like he would be very like joking. And so there would be a prayer. It was like, oh, like protect him from all evil, whatever. And I would laugh because I could hear it in my head be like, evil. Yeah. Like evil. But no, I think like it was easy for like, it wasn't easy, but it's really important to like let yourself and let other people know that that's how you're feeling. If like something happens, you would be like, well, Jordan, this is that. And I think it's part of the healing to talk about them. Yeah. Because it's how you keep them alive in your life. And I think there's a point where like when I noticed I was doing it a lot, when people were like, would say something and I'd be like, oh, well, Jordan, this.
Yeah.
Or they would talk about food and I'd be like, oh, Jordan loved this. And I could hear myself doing it a lot. And so I got self-conscious. But then I think around the right people, it's welcomed.
Yeah.
And it's so important to surround yourself with those people because they understand how real that person was for you and how much of their life impacted yours. And so when people ask, like, I could talk about Jordan for years, for days, as long as someone is an open ear for me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's really important, is to like surround yourself with those people who are willing to hear about it.
And he's still so much a part of you, right,
Yeah.
Zahra? He still is, you know.
Even, and like with Jackson, like it's like when he does certain things, like Jordan and I used to joke about the dumbest stuff. Like when we were like, you know, when our baby does this, and we would just laugh. And when Jackson does it now, I just laugh. And I'm like, you know, there are some times where like I want to cry and like scream and like, and I do, right? Like like grief comes with a lot of anger sometimes, where it's like, you know, how like, and there like recently I was like, you know, how could you do this? Like, look at your son, like whatever. And it's hard not to.
You feel guilty for being sad, eh?
Sometimes, I think like there's just, there's guilt in everything. There's a term that like one of my group calls widow guilt, where and it's not even just widow guilt, but like guilt in general. I think everybody, like even our friends, were like, I should have come around more. I should have, you know what I mean? Or like, it was like, for my parents, it was like, we should have checked on him that day. Or for me, it was, you know, why was I so angry that day? Or, you know, and like, I think there's so much guilt, even too, after, like with Jackson, like, or when you're with your friends and you laugh for the first time, you feel guilty because it's like, am I supposed to laugh? And like, I'm supposed to be sad, so I shouldn't be laughing. Or like food, for example, like there are certain foods that I refuse to eat. And then like poutine was like a really big, like inside joke for him and I, but the first time I had it, I instantly felt guilty.
Wow.
Or, you know, like, and like it guilt is so heavy in grief, and like anyone who goes through it, like you feel guilty over the dumbest things. Even like getting ready today, like to put on makeup, I feel guilty because I'm like, should I even like, why am I doing this if I'm sad, if I'm supposed to be sad?
Wow. And you just get so in your head about it, eh?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's like guilt just like circles you, and it's definitely hard to break. Like myself, I haven't broken through it. Like there are certain things that, like, I don't want to say I don't feel guilty anymore, but I recognize it as part of grief.
Yeah.
And just overall, like everything is almost secondary to sadness. Like the days that I'm angry, I know it's just because I'm sad.
Yeah.
Right? Or because I'm feeling grief. Or the days that I, you know, are really, really, I don't know, emotional, it's because I'm sad. But like anger, for example, anger and guilt, like there's a lot of things that like come with that. Even to everything in the past feels guilty. Like every wrong argument, every like moment that you spent, it all comes up, right? And it's just, everything feels guilty. So it's hard to break through. And like I'm working on it to recognize that it's like it just comes with the grief and it's not my fault. But that's definitely I think like everybody goes through.
That's a beautiful thing that you said. Everything is like secondary to sadness, right? Yeah. Everything's the symptoms of it, right?
Yeah. And I think, I think I haven't had a lot, because when everything happened, like I kept saying like, I don't care anymore. Like, I don't care. Or like things that would make me angry. Or like if we were to say like, oh, like fight or flight, like, or freeze. I used to be fight very, very, like very fast.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care anymore, because I'm like, what's the point of being angry? And so I think like when I am angry with him or with God or with like, you know, surrounding my grief, I'm like, am I really angry or am I just sad?
I wanted to talk about that because I think God and prayer has been coming up in conversation quite a bit.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. How has your faith been affected by this? Like, it seems like God is someone in your life and someone that you turn to.
Yeah.
Like, what was your relationship like that? Did you draw strength from it? Were you angry? Like, was it everything?
I think like when everything happened, and I said like those words to God where I'm like, if you need him more than I do, fine. I think a lot of people around me were like, why God? Like they were in that, like, why God? Why her? Why now? Why this family? Why, with everything going on, why? And I wasn't angry with God. I think like I clung to believing that everything happens for a reason, and I still believe that that's true.
You still believe that, eh?
I still believe it. I mean, it's hard to understand, obviously. And like, do I trust that this is what God had planned? I don't know, right? I think the only thing I can do is that I've learned, especially, is God is a big person, and he's built and he's there to handle those big emotions. So when I am extremely angry, he can take it. Like if I'm yelling at him or I'm angry with him, he can take it. Like that's who he's there. That's who he's supposed to be. He's a big person. Yeah. He can handle those big emotions. And I think like when I do like lean into my faith, it makes me emotional.
So you were never wavered on your faith. You're never like, there is no God, because if there was a God, you know what I mean?
I mean, I think there were definitely times. There's definitely times where I'm like, I'm mad at you. Like, I'm mad at you. How could you do this to my son? Like, how could you do this to me? Or why did you do this? Or why couldn't you fix it? Why didn't you save him? You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely those moments where I'm like questioning that. But then I'm like, what's the point? It's not going to change what happened. And so instead of feeling angry or not understanding, I just have to accept what is and trust the process. Like, I think just to like trust that like everything's going to be okay as long as I trust in my belief that like he is going to be there to provide. And I think too, like my dad, who's not a religious person, we're also not of the same faith, but he's definitely not a religious person. He always says like, if there wasn't a God, then where would our loved ones be? Like, where would they be? And he was like, there has to be a heaven, because I refuse to believe that they just disappear. Right. And so I think like that for me too was a really big thing, especially hearing my dad say that, is like, they have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
They have to be around us somewhere, somehow. And so the only way that's possible is to believe that like God has accepted them or called them home, for example, and is allowing them to protect us and oversee us. So I think like me coming to terms with, because I haven't come to peace with it yet, but me coming to terms with losing Jordan, is through me accepting that he is here. He's just not here in the way that I want him to be. And that's through God's like passage or God's way. And so I think like, I don't know, I'm not like, I haven't super leaned into my faith in a sense of like, well, I have to trust God. I have to try, like, this is what he wanted. This is whatever, because it is hard. Especially when I think about like Jackson, it's like, how could he have done that to my son? But I have to know that like everything's going to be okay, or I have to trust that everything will be okay as long as as long as I keep my faith in him. Because if I don't put my faith in him, then who am I putting faith in?
Yeah, it keeps you going.
Right? It keeps you going. It keeps, and like, yeah.
I wanted to ask just a couple other things. Having all that happen to you, which is quite a lot. I don't even know how to describe it or summarize it. How has it like impacted the way that you look on life and like your future now? Do you think about it?
I have thought about it a lot. I think like looking at my brother's situation, for example, it really changed my outlook on like sibling relationships or like my relationships with my cousins. It was like the first thing that taught me like nothing is forever. And so like I remember in my drama class in high school, there was a girl. She was complaining about her brother. Oh, I hate him. This bull, I hate him. And I remember just saying to her, I'm like, you have no idea how lucky you are to like, and she was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I freaking hate him all. And I was like, one day you're not going to have that. And like, so, and I think like any sibling relationship that I've seen, with such like turmoil, I'm like, just embrace it. Or I'm like, just tell your sibling you love them. I know it's like cringe, or like if my brother were still alive, would we say I love you to each other? Probably not. Because it's weird, right? But I'm like, you don't, like with that first situation, I was like, people don't understand how lucky they are. So that kind of taught me to like hold on to your siblings. And too, like if you have siblings, even luckier, because if and when you lose your parents, those are your people. They are your reflection of what you're going through, because they're going through the exact same thing. They're your mirror. And then when everything happened with Jordan, I think like it definitely, going back to like fight or flight, I'm like, I don't care anymore. Like, I'll fight for what I fight for, and if doesn't serve me, then I let it go. What's the point of I was very much like, what's the point? Right? Like being angry, what's the point? It's not going to change anything. People who don't serve me or make me feel a certain way, regardless of their title in my life, whether it be family, friends, whatever, just because we have history, if you don't serve me positive energy, if you don't serve my life, I don't need you anymore. And so it's very much like, just I think I'm very much like, I let it go now, because I'm like, why am I going to hold on to anger? Why am I going to hold on to negativity or, you know, certain things? And I think too, like it has only made me want other people to understand how lucky they are. Like, and I think like being at our age, everyone's getting engaged, everyone gets married, everyone is having babies, getting pregnant. Does it hurt? Obviously. To watch that happen? Yes, of course, because I had all that. Oh, I'm gonna cry, sorry. I had all of that, you know, and I don't have it anymore. And it was taken away from me in a matter of minutes. And I think people who do get to experience those, or get to come home and see their person or fight with their person, it's like, I just want to make sure that those people know how lucky they are. Because literally nothing is guaranteed. And so it's like, when you fight, what's the point? Right? Like, and so like there's a lot of people in my life who are like getting engaged, getting married, having babies, and it sucks. But doesn't mean I'm not happy for them. But there's always going to be that feeling inside me of like, I don't have that anymore. But it's just me learning to turn that into excitement and gratitude for those people, because I'm like, you're so lucky. Like, I'm so happy for you, because people don't get that. And so like, I just want you to understand how happy this is for you. And I'm not, and it sounds like unintentional envy, and it's, of course I'm envious, but not in a sense of like projecting hurt or pain. It's more of like, you should feel so happy because you get to have this in your life. And so I think like my outlook now is like, just if it's painful, like, or like if I'm angry, am I really angry, or am I just sad? And it's like, why am I angry at this point? It doesn't change anything. And if it's, you know, negative and it keeps hurting me and stressing, like, you know, adding stress and anxiety to my life, then how do I remove that? Or how do I remove myself from that in order to heal?
Yeah.
And then too, just like, even like my parents, when I hear them bicker or like they don't say goodnight to each other because they just argued, I'm like, what's the point, guys?
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's gonna be a day, and that's the thing too that's so hard to swallow, is like, they're gonna die eventually.
Yeah.
Like, everyone is gonna lose, like, you're gonna lose your person eventually. I just so happened to do it so quickly and so early on in our life together that, like, I just hope that people around me value, like, what they have, even like when they have their baby, and like, you know, you get to, like, your kid gets to throw catch with their father, mine doesn't. And I think too, just like having that, making sure that like I'm surrounded by people who have the purest of intentions to be there for me, but also be there for my son. And I think like as long as I do that, then like I'm on the right direction. And like that's what keeps like my like outlook on life just like
Keep going.
keep going, because there's no point in negativity, and there is still so much to be grateful for. I think that too, like, there's still so much to be grateful for. It's a hard reality, because when you lose your person, it's like you don't want anything anymore. Like, life itself, you don't want anymore. You don't want anything. Even when I was pregnant, I kept, like, when I would cry, I would say, I don't want this anymore. Like, I didn't want this without you, Jordan. I told you I didn't want this. You know what I mean? Or like, I would say the same thing to God, but it's like, just like understanding that, like, or just trusting the process, I guess, for lack of better words.
No, I think it's definitely, I think you're very wise, Zahra. I think that no, like,
so cringe.
no, I know, and I know you don't want to take it because you're like, no, don't put the attention on me. But I think the wisdom comes through in your words, and I think kind of the last thing I want to ask you, because I know a lot of people will be watching this. If someone is going through like the darkest part of their grief right now, like, what's one thing you think you could say, or one thing that you think will help them through? I'm talking about the darkest part of their grief.
That they're not alone, because it's very lonesome.
Yeah.
And that it's gonna be okay. I think, like, one thing that so many people in like my group kept saying is, like, even for me, it felt very niche, my grief, because it was like I was pregnant, I lost my fiance, so I didn't even get to experience a wedding. My son never got to meet his father. I know all those dreams are gone, and I'm like, is there anyone else who lost their person while they were
8 months pregnant?
Yeah, while they were 8 months pregnant. And there are.
Yeah.
As, like, no matter how alone you like feel, I be willing to like accept empathy from other people, because whether they've gone through the same hurt, or it's hurt but it's different hurt, it's still pain. And it's not a contest. It's not they don't understand because they don't know what I've gone through. And I definitely leaned into that and really isolated myself, because I'm like, no one understands what I'm going through. Like, screw you, like, stay away from me. But I think, like, it's gonna be okay. Like, and that's when, like, everybody used to say, like, those women that have gone through what I've gone through, they're like, I promise you, like it gets better. Like, saying it gets easier is not right, but that's not the right way to say it. But it's like, this too shall pass. Like, what seems so unbearable and painful now, in like however long it takes, you'll be able to look back and be like, wow.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there are times where, like, I reflect, even with like my friends, I reflect on that first week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even recognize myself. Like, I can't imagine
lying in a bed for a week. I can't believe that was me.
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't mean that my pain then isn't the same pain now. It's just I've learned how to welcome it, deal with it, and then move forward with it. Not move forward from it, but move forward with it. And I think like too that like however much grief you have is however much love you still had to give. Like I said in my eulogy for Jordan was, the grief that sits with me still is the love that I still have, because grief is love. When you have when you have a love that's so strong and so, you know, heavy or strong, and it turns to grief, it's because that grief is so heavy because that love was so strong. And so I think like, don't try and run from the grief, because that grief is really all the love you still have to give for that person. And so in a sense, I hope that like my grief not necessarily stays with me, but my grief can grow back into love.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right? So I think like whoever's going through that, like it's hard and like it's really shitty, and like this too is gonna pass. Like I promise you. Because even I sometimes, there are days that I don't see the light, or I'm like, I just want to go back to the first week. But it does get manageable, or it gets like better.
Yeah. That's really beautiful, Zahra.
Cringe.
Cringe. Everything cringe.
I know, it's so cringe. I hate crying. I hate talking about my emotions.
Oh my God, I just put you through torture.
I know, literally.
I think that's a really beautiful place to stop our first podcast. So I want to thank Zahra again. I'm also actually very curious to know. So when me and Zahra were kids, you know, I was like definitely a weirdo, and she embraced that.
I was a weirdo too.
No, she embraced that, but I want to see if you can finish the sentence.
Oh my God.
You've been
Don't do it. Don't.
You've been wearing
black too long. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Okay, and I want to thank you guys so much for joining us on our first podcast. I'm going to definitely include links to learn more about Zahra, her Instagram page. I think she should do a blog, but that's just my opinion.
Don't have
time. Check out our hula dancing, check out the Hula Club. And if you want to know more about Jackson and learn about his journey and support it, I'll include links down below. But thank you guys so much. And that's our podcast.
Yay, we did it.
A special thanks to Shaky Films, who filmed and edited this episode of The Flow States. For all your wedding and corporate needs, head over to Shaky Films.